Well, we're back here in the room that brought the first hearing to the Albanian people of Kosova. This is the committee room for the International Relations Committee, and if you can pan around, you'll see Congressman Hyde's picture. He's the current chairman, and the former chairman, Congressman Gilman. These are Republicans, and you're going to see our Democrat friends today as well, Congressman Lantos. Why do I mention those three in particular? Because they're the ones that have consistently introduced the resolutions for the independence for Kosova. And even this year, on January 5, Congressman Hyde and Congressman Lantos introduced HRES 24 for the independence of Kosova now. And today, May 18th, we're having a hearing at which the U.S. State Department, the Bush administration, is going to disclose their policy on Kosova. There was an article yesterday in the Washington Post that said that Bush has finally decided that we cannot wait any longer on Kosova, and he's now going to start a process, hopefully ending in a year or two, where Kosova would be independent. The State Department is not saying they support independence yet, but it's obvious that that's the only solution that's going to work, because that's what the Albanian people of Kosova want. That's what they declared in their referendum in 1990 under international law. It's called self-determination. And today we have representatives of the Albanian people to make that case directly. One of the key representatives is Bishop Mark Sopi. He's with us. He's the bishop of the Catholic community, the diocese in Prizren, and he's going to tell us the reality of Albanians in Kosova today. And welcome, Bishop, and we look forward to your testimony.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I will try to say the real situation in Kosovo.
Good, and we look forward to hearing your testimony. We also have Father Sean Zeffi, who is going to submit testimony for the record. Just say hello for the crowd in Albanian.
Përshëndetje.
Okay, it's good to thank you for coming. And Father Luis Georgi. He's going to be testifying. He's the official biographer of Mother Teresa.
Dëshirojmë nëpërmes Nallës Tereze të paraqesim kishën dhe popullin ton për paqe dhe bashkëjetesë me të gjithë.
Thank you for being with us.
The Balkans region has been an area of tremendous concern since the early 1900s. In recent years, the attention of the United States has been diverted to other geostrategic priorities. However, 2005 is an exceptionally important year for the people of the Balkans. Today, this committee considers the most critical issue in the Balkans, the question of Kosovo. In 1999, NATO intervened militarily in the former Yugoslavia. It's important and significant to ask why the final status of Kosovo was left undetermined at that time. The current status of Kosovo, or Kosova as it is also known as, is governed by UN Security Council Resolution 1244. The purpose of this hearing today is to assess the current situation in Kosovo and to consider U.S. administration policies towards Kosovo and its future status. I look forward to the testimony of our witnesses, and at this time, I'm pleased to recognize our distinguished ranking Democratic member, Mr. Lantos.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and let me thank you for your continuing leadership on this very important issue. I also want to thank you for joining me in sponsoring House Resolution 24, which expresses the sense of the House of Representatives that the United States should support the independence of Kosovo. I firmly believe that the position our resolution advocates is the only way to bring lasting stability and prosperity to this region. The basic issue that we are facing is simple. The current status quo of limbo is not sustainable. And unless it is changed, and changed clearly and resolutely, we will have renewed ethnic violence, and the integration of Kosovo into Europe will be further delayed. There is a very positive outcome to this crisis, and that, of course, is the full integration of Kosovo as an independent, democratic, multi-ethnic country into an integrated Europe. That is the goal we seek, and that is the goal we shall achieve. There are few issues, Mr. Chairman, on which I have been as deeply engaged as the issue of Kosovo. I am convinced that the only way to address the problem of the political, economic, and social instability that plagues the Balkans and to prevent renewed violence in the region is to grapple without delay with the issue of Kosovo's final status. Under Slobodan Milosevic, the Serbian government dismantled Kosovo's political institutions. Before the breakup of the former Yugoslavia, Kosovo was an autonomous province. Under Milosevic, Kosovars were subjected to systematic persecution and discrimination. Ethnic Albanians were replaced by Serbs in most jobs. Serb-owned firms took over Albanian-owned companies, and Albanians were prohibited from purchasing or improving property. I traveled to Kosovo many times as this was taking place, so my knowledge of these facts is not book knowledge. It stems from personal, first-hand experience, as Mrs. Lantos and I made repeated trips to Kosovo. I will never forget when I spoke before, on one occasion, a large group that spontaneously gathered in the main square of Pristina in May of 1990. My wife Annette and I were greeted with joy by the people because we represented the United States of America. The crowd chanted, "USA, USA," while the Serbian police were beating Albanians at the edge of the crowd. Years later, all of us watched in horror at the mass devastation of ethnic Albanians by Serb paramilitary forces with the support of the Milosevic government. Kosovars were killed, their homes were burned and pillaged, and hundreds of thousands were made homeless. All of us remember the scenes on CNN in 1999 as Albanians were forced out of their homeland. We watched old ladies with babies in their arms and pregnant women forced across the borders. It was one of the most horrific sights I witnessed since the Holocaust. Since our successful military action, the international community has joined Kosovars in rebuilding their country, revitalizing their economy, establishing democratic institutions of self-government, and attempting to heal the scars of war. Currently, Kosovo remains a United Nations protectorate, but further progress is hindered by the uncertainty about its final political status. Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, the problems continue to be extremely serious. Unemployment rate stands over 60%. The economic crisis increases the likelihood that Kosovars, 50% of whom are under the age of 25, will either enter criminal networks or will leave to find work abroad in order to survive. The perpetuation of these economic conditions heightens the potential for continued instability in the region, and this undermines our vital interests in the Balkans. Achieving genuine long-term political and economic stability requires more than reconstruction assistance. It demands a resolution of the political status of Kosovo. International private investment and even loans from the World Bank are delayed or not even considered because of questions about the long-term status of Kosovo. Mr. Chairman, you personally expressed the link with special eloquence in December of 2002, when you said, and I quote, "There will be no jobs without peace and stability in Kosovo, but there will be no peace and stability without independence." End quote. I could not agree more. Under the Yugoslav Constitution of 1974, Kosovo was the functional equivalent in most ways to Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, and Macedonia, the other republics of the former Yugoslavia. As an autonomous province, Kosovo exercised the same powers as a republic. It had its own parliament, high courts, central bank, police force, and local defense elements. Through constitutional change in 1968, Kosovo was recognized as a constituent element of the Yugoslav federal system. When Slovenia and Croatia demanded independence in 1991, Western European governments, including our own Department of State and the White House, opposed recognizing the right of those republics to self-determination. I remember marching at Union Square with my Croatian friends demanding independence for Croatia, while the State Department and the White House indicated that Yugoslavia will persist forever. Eventually, our government and the rest of the world acknowledged the independence of Slovenia and Croatia, and later the independence of Bosnia-Herzegovina and Macedonia as well. These four republics are now members of the United Nations. Slovenia is a member of NATO and the European Union, and Croatia is on its way to entering the European Union and NATO. I am confident that the other constituent units of the former Yugoslavia will eventually all become members of both the European Union and NATO. So there is light at the end of this tunnel. In the 1990s, we found that self-determination for Slovenia and Croatia involved not so much a change of borders as a change in the status of existing borders. The lines on the map remained the same, but their status was upgraded from constituent republic within a federation to an independent nation. This has contributed to the stability and progress of these countries. Mr. Chairman, Kosovo is entitled to precisely the same treatment. There must be no double standard. When Slovenia and Croatia, Bosnia and Macedonia were admitted to the United Nations, there was no talk of standards before status. Unfortunately, this has become a slogan for delay and indecision as it relates to Kosovo. The result is that for the past 6 years, there has been no serious discussion of the status of Kosovo, and the United States and our European allies have watched as the economy has floundered and as ethnic tensions have escalated. This led to severe violence and bloodshed. The region hovered on the brink of further bloodshed and conflict, and it still festers today. But now is the time to take the next inevitable but crucial step and resolve the status of Kosovo by recognizing it as an independent, sovereign nation. This will not be easy for the Serbian people and for their government in Belgrade. We must help Serbia understand the choices it faces. Mr. Chairman, the topic of our hearing today is not an interesting intellectual exercise. We are dealing with one of the most significant and volatile problems in Europe today. Finding a solution is urgent, and taking significant steps now to recognize the independence of Kosovo is essential. I look forward to the testimony of our witnesses.
Is there anybody here who wants to make an opening statement? Mr. Rohrbacher.
Let me thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank Mr. Lantos for the leadership that you two have provided on this issue. It's time to get on with it.
I can't hear you.
It's time to get on with it. We've wasted so much time while the lives of these people just go on and on. The young people in Kosovo feel helpless. And unless we move and act to recognize that they have the rights as everyone else to control their own destiny through the ballot box, they're going to be just as angry as Americans would be in the same situation. We shouldn't permit the rights of our young people ever to be violated such, and we should consider the people of Kosovo just as on an equal level with our own people. It's time to get on with this job, give them their rights, give them the right to vote and control their own country, and to have a democratically elected government. This administration, if it is serious about promoting democracy, which we hear from the president all the time, can start with Kosovo, and it's a great place to start because we can do it so easily. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. We now turn to our first witness, Bishop Sopi.
Zotni Kryesus, Zotni Congressman, ju falenderoj që më keni dhënë mundësinë me mujtën këtu, edhe unë mi qiten pikpamjet e mia sa I përket çështjes Kosovës.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, honorable members of Congress. I feel honored today to be here, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak before you and express my views on the current situation in Kosovo.
Kishte me qenën më mirë që feja më nda prej politike.
I do believe that it is best for the religion to be always separate from politics,
Se politika vetëm I bën dëm fejes.
because politics can only harm the religion.
Unë jam I bindën se edhe me këtë rastin tonë gjithashtu pasojat e një simpatie apo pjesëmarrje në politik janë që kishat edhe janë rënua.
And I do believe that the engagement in politics of the Serbian Orthodox Church in Kosovo has to some extent caused the anger of the extremist elements during the riots to kind of attack their buildings.
Po, kishte me qenën shumë mirë
It would be way better
që mu marrë më tepër me gjëna fetare,
for the religious leaders to really deal with religion,
edhe jo vetëm kisha, por edhe populli I serb I cili jeton në Kosovë,
and not only the Serbian Orthodox Church, but also the Serbian people in Kosovo
mu pajtue me realitetin e ri që është Kosova.
should finally accept the new reality in which Kosovo lives today,
Atëherë kishte me pasën shumë më tepër paqë,
so that we could come to peace sooner.
se për ndryshe si të identifikohet me politikën e Beogradit,
But for as long as the Serbian Orthodox Church is a frontrunner for the Belgrade's policies,
atëherë konsiderohet si anmike e popullit shqiptar.
then it may be considered as well. It may be considered a political enemy as well for the
E nuk është
people,
çudi që atëherë do
in
të
Kosovo.
atakohet.
and it would not be. It would then suffer probably attacks that it did.
Në Kosovë ka pasën shumë lufta edhe në të kaluamën.
Kosovo has witnessed and undergone many wars in the past as well.
Por popullata nuk ka qenë e implikuar në luftë.
But most of the time, the civilian population was never directly involved in creating the war.
Mjerisht në këtë rast është keq përdorur edhe popullata vendore.
Unfortunately, in the last Kosovo war, the Serb local population was used to get involved in the crimes that were being committed.
Shumë anëmiqësi.
And that's what has created more enmity.
Jam I mendimit që ne si kisha katolike, si kisha ortodokse, çdo bashkësi fetare të merret më tepër me gjëna fetare e politikën të lënë politikanëve.
I do believe that we, as a Catholic Church, the Serbian Orthodox Church, and other religious communities should be mainly concerned with the religious issues rather than politics, and leave the politics to the politicians.
Na si kish katolike kemi pas dëshirë dhe kemi bashkëpunuar me të gjithë.
As Catholic Church of Kosovo, we have always been open to cooperate, and we have cooperated with all other religious
Gjithashtu
institutions,
dhe jemi të gatshëm që të bashkëpunojmë me të gjithë.
and we're ready to do so again now.
Por duhet që të kenë mirë kuptim edhe dialog me palën tjetër.
but we hope that in trying to do this, we will reach some understanding from the other side as well.
And now, Ms. DioGuardi.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you for your leadership in holding this hearing, and also you and Congressman Lantos for introducing House Resolution 24, supporting the United States recognition of Kosovo's independence now. I think in order to address Kosovo's current economic and political status and U.S. foreign policy in the region, looking at final status in particular, we have to talk a little bit about the history for the last 2 decades of our administration. And with all due respect to Ambassador Burns, I cannot share his pride in the 20 years of activity on the part, or I should say perhaps inactivity on the part of the administration. As Congressman Dana Rohrabacher said earlier, we're a little late. It's very good what's happening now in terms of returning to the issue of the Balkans. But when we talk about pride, I think we have to talk about the House International Relations Committee. The House International Relations Committee can be proud because it has consistently responded to the conflict in the Southeast Europe in the last century, in the current century, consistently supported aspirations for freedom and democracy on the part of peoples in the region who suffered from almost 50 years of communism, and in the case of Albanians, from racism and genocide. If you go back 18 years, when this really began, the initiative in the House, it was Congressman Lantos and then Congressman DioGuardi that introduced with 57 colleagues H-Conres 162, which exposed the egregious abuse of human rights of Kosovo's Albanians and called for justice. Now, unfortunately, at that time, the State Department, under pressure from former colleagues and American friends of Slobodan Milosevic who had worked in the region, opposed every initiative by the House. And ultimately, Congressman Lantos and DioGuardi prevailed in getting a hearing. But what we see from 1989 on, after Milosevic invades and occupies Kosovo, we see a pattern that continued for a decade, and the consequences were really quite terrible. I mean, Vukovar gets attacked, House opposes it, the International Relations Committee opposes it, the administration doesn't act. Kosovo is occupied brutally, House opposes, Congressman Lantos introduces another resolution, the administration doesn't act. Bosnia is attacked. Concentration camps were concealed. 5 members of our State Department resign in opposition. Nothing happens. The only time there was an exception was when President George Herbert Walker Bush announced his Christmas warning in 1993, warning Slobodan Milosevic that if you start to move in on Kosovo in a military way, if you wage war, then you're going to be in trouble. There'll be dire consequences. But for the most part, State has just, embraced a policy of appeasement and containment. And then in February of '98, the Christmas warning was violated. And the Serbian military and paramilitary troops attacked Kosovo, raped, pillaged, and murdered their way across the country, so that by the time the United States was forced to lead NATO airstrikes against Serbia in March '99, Serbian military and paramilitary forces had killed more than 300,000 men, women, and children in Bosnia, at least 10,000 in Kosovo. A couple thousand are still missing, and had displaced more than 4 million people in Southeast Europe. Now, there was a short period of time from March until June of '99 when the airstrikes were being conducted. The Congress and the administration came together at that point and realized they were going to have to bring down Milosevic and his henchmen. And the American people broadly supported the government in that, especially as they saw Albanians being herded in cattle cars to the border and thrown into camps. However, when the war came to an end with the capitulation of Milosevic, the United States agreed to defer any decision regarding Kosovo's final status. And what you see at that point is a reemergence of the State Department's embrace of its historical Belgrade-centric attitude. And I think that the evidence, though, of the past 6 years is that delaying final status has been a mistake. And it's time for the administration to look at House Resolution 24 as the blueprint for going forward. The worst thing that's happened, I think, in the post-war period is that reactionary forces in Belgrade and in Washington have succeeded, and we heard some of this today in part, succeeded in creating in the international media and in the minds of some of our government officials that there's a false parity between the perpetrators of state-sponsored terrorism and the Albanian and Bosnian victims of genocide, between the perpetrators and some individual Albanians who retaliated against individual Serbs. And so in this period, we see that the sovereign state of Serbia has been able to miscast Albanians of the Balkans as the source of violence in the region. And one of the reasons they've been able to do it, and my colleagues, Bishop Sobi in particular, spoke about this, they've been able to portray Albanians as Muslims in the heart of Europe. And in a post-9/11 world, they've gone further and said, well, these Muslims are a potentially terrorist force in the heart of Europe. It's easy to convince Westerners of this who are largely untutored in the realities of Eastern Europe.
Thank you very much, Mrs. DioGuardi. Mr. Rohrbacher.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Joe and Shirley DioGuardi for the hard work that they put out on this issue and this cause over the years. And it's been vitally important that a group of people in desperate situations in another part of the world were given direction on how to state their case and how to make sure people understood what was going on through the very complicated democratic process in the United States. So I think Joe and Shirley have done a tremendous job in making sure that we got the picture of what was going on instead of a blurred picture of what was going on there. I'd like to make one note for the record, Mr. Chairman, that is that when we do talk about the United Nations, but the administration seems to believe that the United Nations now should play a role in this process. And we're going to have United Nations representatives there as some negotiators or reconciliators, democratic reconciliators. I just wonder, Mr. Chairman, if those United Nations representatives will be from democratic countries or not. And I'm sorry I didn't have our representative here from the administration. It seems that perhaps a large number of countries in the United Nations are not democratic, and sending perhaps people from China or North Korea or you know, any of these other great countries, Burma, to come to help the Kosovars negotiate for democracy wouldn't really be of great service. And that's why the United States has to make decisions rather than leaving it up to the United Nations. Because in the United Nations there is a tremendous, let's say, influence of people who do not believe in democracy and the value of liberty and justice. And with that said, let me ask the panel about some of the objections that people have. Ms. DioGuardi just mentioned the bugaboo of radical Islamic center right there in Europe. And let me ask, we have some Christian leaders here with us. Are you worried? You know what's going on among your fellow Kosovars, and you know that they're of another faith. Many of them are Muslims. Are you worried about radical Islam taking over in Kosovo and your faith being some way jeopardized by radical Muslims like you see in Iran or with bin Laden?
Ne nuk kemi frikë që me të vërtet dhe të vinë në islamizëm radikale, por në qoftë se vazhdon një situatë e tillë, siç ka ardhur deri me tash, rrezikon me kaplue grupet e vogla, ndoshta edhe mu zhvillu përpara, po përndryshe nuk frigohemi se do të kenë ose do të mund të vinë në islamizëm radikal.
We're absolutely not worried that it will ever come to the point that we'll be overtaken by radical Islam. But I do think that if the status quo, is prolonged forever, then small extremist groups could emerge, and that could threaten to some extent. But I still do not believe that it will ever come to the point that radical Islam will over.
So his answer is, the longer that we refrain from letting the people of Kosovo have their rights to run their own country, the greater the chance that there will be radicalism will rise up among Muslims.
Populli i Kosovës ka beson edhe mbështetet shumë në demokracinë perëndimore, veçanërisht në demokracinë e juaj amerikane.
The people that be true, I'd agree with you, and I'd also add that the people of Kosovo have always believed in democracy, and especially in the American democracy.
Në qoftë se I duket se me të vërtet nuk ka gjë për kësaj shprese të cilën e pret me ardhen prej Evropës perëndimore apo prej jush, por ma konkret kisha me thënë Evropa nuk besoj se është në gjendje për me zgjidhën çështjen tonë politike. Jeni ju ata të cilët keni filluar këtë proces, edhe dëshirojmë edhe besoj se vetëm ju mund ta zgjidhni drejt ashtu siç duhet.
But if this strong belief that they have had in the American democracy, but this strong belief that they have had in American democracy may vanish as time goes on and nothing happens, because their hopes have been so great that there will come a time that they'll be free and democratic the way Americans or other Western Europeans live. And that's what we do believe, that it is you, and I don't think Europe can solve our political problem, but I do believe that it is the United States, in which democracy we do believe in, that can step in and solve the problem so that our hope comes true, and then we do get to be democratic as you are.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, we have leaders of the Christian leaders here with us, people who should, if anyone fears radical Islam in their country, it should be these people, because they represent their congregations, and they are here telling us that an independent Kosovo is the way to go to thwart radical Islam. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you very much, Mr. Rohrbacher. We will thank this panel for your great contribution to this important subject, and we will stay in touch with you. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from each other. And thank you, Shirley, and give our best to Joe.